My sister and her husband showed up at my housewarming party with suitcases in hand. My mom had already sent me a message, acting like everything was arranged. The next day, I sent their belongings right back with a note of my own. You want to hear about family drama? Well, let me tell you my story. My name is Victoria, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a product manager at a major tech company based in San Francisco, but I work remotely from Austin, Texas. The pay is excellent. And 2 months ago, I finally achieved my lifelong dream. I bought a house, a beautiful 4-bedroom home in the suburbs of Cedar Park, complete with a large backyard, a patio with a built-in grill, and space for a future hot tub. The moment I walked through that front door, I knew it was meant to be mine. Hardwood floors stretched throughout the entire house. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the living room with natural light, and a spacious deck overlooked a peaceful greenbelt. After years of cramped apartments and penny pinching, this was my sanctuary. I spent the next 2 months in pure bliss, furnishing each room exactly how I wanted it. I ordered furniture online, coordinated with delivery teams, and worked closely with my interior designer on every detail, from the perfect shade of gray for the accent wall to the beige throw pillows that tied everything together. For the first time in my life, I was creating a space that was completely mine. But to understand why this house meant so much to me, you need to know about my family. I have parents in their late 60s, typical baby boomers with their own ideas about what's fair. Then there's my younger sister, Michelle, who's 31 and has always been the golden child. In our family, it was crystal clear who the favorite was. And it certainly wasn't me. My parents paid for Michelle's full education at the University of Texas in Austin, covered her apartment rent throughout all 4 years of college, and even threw her an elaborate wedding at a hill country venue with an outdoor ceremony, live band, and open bar. The whole celebration cost them over $30,000. Meanwhile, when I turned 16, I started working part-time, fixing computers for neighbors and setting up home networks for small businesses. I learned early that if I wanted anything in life, I'd have to earn it myself. My parents made it clear they wouldn't contribute a dime to my future. So you can imagine my shock when they suddenly handed me $20,000 after I graduated high school. I nearly fell off my chair. "This is for your college education," my mother said, as if she was doing me this enormous favor. I thanked them profusely, feeling guilty for all the resentment I'd harbored over the years. Maybe they did love me equally after all. But the truth came out much later. And it changed everything. The $20,000 wasn't from my parents at all. It came from my grandmother's estate. My grandmother had sold her condo in Florida and left specific instructions in her will that the proceeds be divided equally for her granddaughter's education. $10,000 for me. $10,000 for Michelle. My parents hadn't spent a single penny of their own money on my education. They simply gave me what was already mine by law. But I didn't know this at the time. I took that money and went to the University of California, Berkeley, to study computer science. I lived in the cramped dorms, worked as a freelance web developer on the side, survived on scholarships and grants, and barely touched the money my parents gave me. Through careful budgeting and frugal living, I stretched that $10,000 to cover what my scholarships didn't dollars. Meanwhile, Michelle was living comfortably back in Austin, studying communications at UT. My parents not only gave her the same $10,000, but they also paid her rent, sent her spending money, and made sure she never wanted for anything. After graduation, I moved back to Texas briefly, then landed my current job and rented a small 1-bedroom apartment in South Austin. The place was tiny, barely 600 square feet, but it was mine. And I was proud of it. For the next 10 years, I saved religiously. Every paycheck, I set aside at least 30%. Every bonus went straight into my house fund. Every tax refund, every bit of freelance income, everything went toward my dream of owning my own home. Meanwhile, my parents continued supporting Michelle and her husband Derek. They'd met in college, and he fancied himself an entrepreneur, though his businesses never seemed to make any money. Michelle called herself a freelance social media consultant. But from what I could tell, she had maybe 2 clients and spent most of her time posting on Instagram. My parents paid half their rent in a trendy downtown Austin neighborhood, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and rooftop pools that cost $1,800 a month. They couldn't afford it on their own. But why would they try when Mom and Dad kept footing the bill? I tried not to think about this inequality. Bitterness wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I focused on my own goals, my own success. And finally, after a decade of sacrifice, I had enough for a down payment. The day I closed on the house was one of the happiest of my life. This wasn't just a building, it was proof that I could achieve anything on my own. Without family help or handouts, now I was ready to share my success with the people I loved. I was ready to show my family what hard work and determination could accomplish. I just didn't realize how that would backfire. I invited my family to see the house, about a week after I moved in. My parents knew I'd bought a place, but they'd never visited. There was always some excuse. They had plans at their lake house. Dad's blood pressure was acting up. Mom had a doctor's appointment. "We'll come see it soon." "Honey," Mom would say, "we're just so busy right now." But I persisted. And finally, they agreed to come over on a Friday evening. They arrived in their old Honda sedan around 6 o'clock. Mom, Dad, Michelle, and Derek. I was so excited to show them around that I practically bounced on my heels as I opened the door. "Welcome to my home," I said, gesturing them inside. I gave them the full tour, pointing out every feature I loved. The open-concept kitchen with the marble island, the hardwood floors that I'd had professionally refinished, the master bedroom with its walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom, the 3 additional bedrooms upstairs, the backyard with its mature oak trees and the patio where I planned to host barbecues. But as we walked through each room, I noticed their expressions changing. Mom kept sighing as she ran her hand along the kitchen counters. Dad remained mostly silent, just nodding occasionally. Derek looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. But it was Michelle's reaction that troubled me most. My sister's face grew darker with each room we entered. By the time we reached the 2nd floor, her jaw was clenched tight. "Why do you need so many bedrooms?" she finally blurted out, her voice sharp. "You live alone." I tried to laugh it off. "Well, I won't be alone forever. Someday I'll get married. Maybe have kids. Besides, I've always dreamed of having a spacious home. There's nothing wrong with that." "Right," Michelle's eyes narrowed. I could see the envy radiating from her like heat. She'd always been the pretty one, the popular one, the one who got everything handed to her. And now here I was, the nerdy older sister she'd always looked down on, living in a house that was probably worth 4 times what she paid in annual rent. Mom must have noticed the tension, because she quickly walked over and patted Michelle on the shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Mom said soothingly. "Everything will work out for you too. You'll see." What did that even mean? But I didn't ask. I was too focused on trying to salvage the mood, to remind myself that I'd worked hard for this and deserved to be proud. The visit wrapped up quickly after that. They made excuses about traffic and left within the hour. As I watched their car pull away, I felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief. Mission accomplished. I'd shown them the house. Now everyone knew I was doing well. Surely that was the end of it. Looking back, I was so naive. 2 weeks later, I decided to throw a proper housewarming party. I'd been planning it for months. This was going to be my big celebration. The moment when I could share my joy with everyone who mattered to me. I created a Facebook event and sent invitations to about 50 people, colleagues from work, friends from my Berkeley days, neighbors from my subdivision, and of course, my family. Despite the awkward first visit, I included Michelle and my parents. They were family, after all, and I wanted them to see me happy, surrounded by people who appreciated my success. By 6 o'clock on Saturday evening, Guests started arriving. Tech friends drove in from Dallas, Houston, and even San Antonio. 3 of my college roommates flew in from California, just for the occasion. My neighbor, Tom, and his wife brought a beautiful houseplant and immediately set to work helping me arrange tables on the deck. The weather was perfect that gorgeous Texas spring evening when the temperature drops just enough to be comfortable but the air still holds the warmth of the day. I'd ordered catering, nothing fancy. Just good barbecue, and set up a self-serve bar on the patio. Music played from speakers I'd mounted on the deck, and fairy lights twinkled overhead. Everything was perfect, except my parents and sister weren't there. At 7 o'clock, right when the party was hitting its stride, Mom sent a text. "Your father's blood pressure is acting up again. I'm not feeling great either. Sorry, sweetheart. We won't be able to make it. Have a wonderful time." I stared at my phone, feeling that familiar sting of disappointment. But honestly, I wasn't surprised. My parents had never been particularly enthusiastic about my achievements. They'd missed my college graduation because Dad had a cold. They'd skipped my 30th birthday party because they'd already booked a cruise. There was always something. I took a deep breath, put my phone away, and rejoined my guests. I wasn't going to let their absence ruin my evening. The party was wonderful. People laughed, ate, drank, and told me how beautiful the house was. My colleague Sarah from work raised her glass and gave an impromptu toast to Victoria, who proves that hard work and determination can make dreams come true. Everyone cheered. I felt tears prick my eyes. These people, my friends, my colleagues, my neighbors, they were genuinely happy for me. That's what mattered. Then, around 8 o'clock, I heard my front door open. I was in the kitchen, refilling the ice bucket, when I heard Michelle's voice calling out, "Vicky, where are you?" I walked into the living room. Confused, Michelle and Derek stood in my entryway, and each of them was pulling a large rolling suitcase. "Hey," I said slowly, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. "You made it after all, but what's with the luggage?" My sister smiled at me like nothing unusual was happening. In fact, she smiled like she'd just won the lottery. "Mom said we could stay with you for a while," she announced, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. "We're moving in. Where's the master bedroom? We need to unpack." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stood there, my mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "What do you mean?" "Moving in," I finally managed to say, but Derek was already heading for the stairs, dragging both suitcases behind him. "Derek, wait," I called out. But he didn't stop. He rushed after him, my heart pounding. This had to be some kind of joke. Maybe they were staying the night because they'd been drinking. That had to be it. But when I reached the second floor, Derek had already opened the door to my bedroom, my private sanctuary, that I'd spent weeks decorating exactly how I wanted it, and was unloading bags onto my bed. "Hey, what are you doing?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Getting settled," Derek said, not even looking at me. He unzipped one of the suitcases and started pulling out clothes. Michelle appeared behind me, carrying a cosmetics bag and a pillow. "Come on, Vicky. Clear out half the closet. This is our room now." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. This couldn't be happening. This had to be a nightmare. "Michelle, you can't just move into my house without asking me first," I said, hearing the panic in my own voice. My sister finally looked at me, and her expression was so entitled, so certain of herself, that it made my blood run cold. "Mom already discussed everything with you," she said dismissively, turning back to unpack. "No," I said firmly. "She absolutely did not discuss this with me." Michelle just shrugged. "Well, she told us you were fine with it. So here we are." I stood there in my own bedroom, watching these 2 people make themselves at home in my space. And I felt completely powerless. Downstairs, I could hear the sounds of my party continuing laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. My guests were probably wondering where I'd disappeared to. I couldn't make a scene. Not now. Not with 50 people in my house who'd come to celebrate with me. "We'll talk about this later," I said, my voice shaking. "I have guests downstairs." "Sure. Sure," Michelle said, waving me away. "We'll be down in a few minutes. Don't worry about us. Don't worry about them. They just invaded my home like a conquering army." And I was supposed to go back downstairs and pretend everything was fine. But what choice did I have? I somehow made it back downstairs and rejoined the party. I smiled. I laughed. I accepted compliments on the house. But inside, my mind was racing. I stepped out onto the porch, away from the crowd, and called my mom. My hands were shaking as I held the phone to my ear. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. 5 minutes later, a text message appeared on my screen. "Victoria, don't make a scene. Michelle has just as much right to a nice place to live as you do. They'll stay with you until they can save up for their own place. Be a good sister." I read the message 3 times, unable to believe what I was seeing. My mother, my own mother, seriously believed that my sister had a right to my house. The house I'd worked 10 years to afford. The house I'd bought with my own money. My own savings. My own sacrifice. And she thought I should just accept this, just let them move in, because they couldn't afford their own place. Fury boiled up inside me. Hot and fierce. But I was trapped. I had a house full of guests. I couldn't explode now and ruin everyone's evening, including my own. So I did what I'd been doing my whole life. I swallowed my anger, put on a smile, and pretended everything was fine. About 20 minutes later, Michelle and Derek came back downstairs. They'd changed clothes and freshened up, and they moved through my party like they owned the place, introducing themselves to my friends and colleagues. "We're so lucky to be moving into such a beautiful home," Michelle told my colleague Sarah, her voice dripping with false gratitude. "Oh, are you house-sitting for Victoria?" Sarah asked innocently. "No, we're living here now," Michelle said, smiling. "Family takes care of family." "Right," I wanted to scream, but I just stood there, nodding and smiling, dying inside. Then it got worse. When people complimented my interior design choices, Michelle started taking credit for them. "Oh yes, I actually recommended those curtains to Vicky," she told one group of guests, gesturing at the gray linen curtains I'd spent weeks selecting. "And the couch was totally my find on Wayfair. I have an eye for design." "Really?" my neighbor Tom's wife said, looking impressed. "You should go into interior decorating." I stood nearby, my fingernails digging into my palms, while this shameless woman claimed credit for all my work, all my careful planning, all my decisions. But inside, a plan was already forming. A cold, clear plan. There was absolutely no way I was letting them stay in my house. Not for one night. Not for one more hour than necessary. The party finally ended around 11. Guests thanked me, hugged me, told me how beautiful everything was. I smiled and thanked them, playing my part perfectly. After the last guest left, I went upstairs. My bedroom, my private sanctuary, had been completely taken over. Their clothes hung in my closet, pushing my own things aside. Their toiletries cluttered my bathroom counter. Their phone chargers were plugged into my outlets. Derek's shoes sat by the door. They'd made themselves at home. I grabbed my pajamas and a change of clothes for the next day and went to the guest room. I lay in that bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind working through exactly what I needed to do. My family had always treated me like their personal ATM. They'd always expected me to be grateful for their scraps, while they gave Michelle everything. But trying to take my house, that was too far. Way too far. I woke up at 6 o'clock the next morning, my resolve stronger than ever. I went downstairs to find Michelle and Derek already in my kitchen, sitting at my table, drinking my coffee from my mugs. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Morning," Michelle said cheerfully, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "We were thinking we could go to Home Depot later and pick out some paint for the guest room. I'm thinking a nice sage green would look amazing in there." She wanted to redecorate my house now. "We'll need house keys made," Derek added, not looking up from his phone. "We both get home from work before you most days, and we can't just sit outside waiting. I'll make sure to be home early to let you in," I replied smoothly. "I haven't had duplicates made yet." Michelle rolled her eyes. "Vicky, come on. Just give us your keys for today, and we'll get copies made. It's not a big deal. I need my keys for work," I said. "But don't worry. I'll be here to let you in." Michelle looked annoyed, but didn't push it. They finished their coffee and left around 7:30. Derek complaining about having to pick up some supplies for his latest business venture. The moment their white Volkswagen pulled out of my driveway, I sprang into action. First, I called my boss, Michael. "Hi, Michael. I'm so sorry for the short notice, but I have an unexpected family emergency. Can I take a personal day today?" "Of course." "Victoria," he said, concern in his voice. "Is everything okay?" "It will be," I said. "I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for understanding." The moment I hung up, I went upstairs and started methodically packing their belongings back into their suitcases. Every piece of clothing, every toiletry, every personal item, everything went back in. I worked quickly and efficiently, checking each room to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Their toothbrushes, in the suitcase. Derek's electric razor, in the suitcase. Michelle's expensive face cream, in the suitcase. That pillow she'd brought in the suitcase. When I was done, I had 2 large suitcases, 3 shopping bags, and a garment bag full of their things. I dragged everything downstairs and called a local delivery service. "I need urgent, same-day delivery to an address in North Dallas." I told them. "Sure thing," the dispatcher said. "We can have someone there in 30 minutes. While I waited, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote a note on a piece of printer paper. I kept it simple and direct, matching my mother's dramatic communication style. "There is no room for freeloaders in my home. You deal with them yourselves." When the delivery driver arrived, I helped him load everything into his van and taped my note prominently to the largest suitcase. "Make sure this goes directly to the front door," I instructed. "Someone will be home to receive it." "Yes, ma'am," he said. I watched the van drive away, feeling lighter than I had in 24 hours. Then I went back inside, changed the locks on my doors, and waited. My phone started ringing at 11:30. First Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then Dad. Voicemail. Then Michelle. Voicemail. Then Derek. Voicemail. By noon, I had 20 missed calls from Mom, 15 from Dad, and countless more from Michelle and Derek. Then the text messages started flooding in. "Mom, Vicky. How could you? She's your sister Dad's sweetheart. What's going on?" Michelle is crying. "They have nowhere to go." "Mom again. We didn't raise you to be so heartless. What happened to family loyalty?" Michelle, Victoria. "Have you completely lost your mind? Where are our things? We broke our lease. Mom said we could stay with you. You're ruining our lives with your selfishness, Derek. This is insane. We had an agreement." I read through every message calmly, then typed out a single response that I sent to Michelle. "You can stay with Mom and Dad. They have a 3-bedroom house. Plenty of room for both of you." Then I blocked all their numbers. The silence that followed was beautiful. For the first time in my adult life, I'd stood up to my family's manipulation. I'd set a clear boundary and enforced it. And it felt incredible. I spent the rest of the day deep cleaning my bedroom, washing all my bedding, and making the space mine again. I burned a lavender candle, played my favorite music, and reclaimed my sanctuary. That night, I slept better than I had in years. For 2 blissful weeks, my life returned to normal. No unexpected visitors. No entitled relatives trying to occupy my home. No dramatic phone calls or manipulative text messages. I went to work, came home to my beautiful house, and enjoyed the peace and quiet. I cooked dinners in my kitchen, read books on my deck, and invited a couple of friends over for wine one evening. It was everything I dreamed of when I bought this place. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, I received a certified letter. The return address made my stomach drop. Davidson and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Dallas, Texas. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and read, "Dear Ms. Victoria Henderson, we represent Mr. James Henderson and Mrs. Patricia Henderson regarding a family matter. Our clients wish to inform you that they intend to file a civil lawsuit seeking reimbursement of $20,000, $20. Ling ling ling. 0, which they provided for your college education. Our clients assert that these funds were provided with the implicit understanding of family support and loyalty. Your recent actions in evicting your sister Michelle Henderson and her husband from your residence constitute a breach of family obligations. Our clients are willing to forego legal action if you agree to either one. Allow Ms. Michelle Henderson and her spouse to reside in your property, rent-free for a period of no less than 18 months. Or 2. Reimburse the full amount of $20,000, $20. Ling ling ling. 0 within 30 days. Please respond to this letter within 10 business days to avoid litigation. Sincerely, Robert J. Davidson, Esq. I read the letter 3 times, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. My parents were threatening to sue me, to sue their own daughter, because I wouldn't let my sister freeload in the house I'd worked a decade to afford. I didn't know enough about law to know if they had a case. For all I knew, they could actually force me to pay them back. The thought made me sick. But then I remembered something Aunt Linda had mentioned years ago about my grandmother's will. I grabbed my phone and called her immediately. "Aunt Linda. It's Victoria. I need to ask you something really important about my college money." "Of course." "Sweetheart," she said. "What's going on? Do you know where that $20,000 actually came from? The money Mom and Dad gave me for college." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Victoria, don't you know?" Aunt Linda said slowly. "Know what? That wasn't your parents' money. Honey, that was your inheritance from your grandmother." The room seemed to tilt. "What do you mean? When your grandmother passed away, it was the year before you graduated high school. Remember, she left very specific instructions in her will. She'd sold her condo in Florida, and the proceeds were to be divided equally between educational trust funds for both her granddaughters. $10,000 for you. $10,000 for Michelle." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Are you telling me that my parents didn't spend any of their own money on my education? Not a single penny?" Aunt Linda confirmed. "They simply gave you what was already legally yours, according to your grandmother's will. Your father sent me a copy years ago. Would you like me to forward it to you?" "Yes," I said immediately. "Please. Right now. Give me 5 minutes." I paced my living room, my mind reeling. All these years, I'd thought my parents had finally done something equal for both their daughters. But no, they'd just been distributing money that was already mine. And now they were threatening to sue me for it. My email pinged. Aunt Linda had sent the document. I opened it and read the notarized will from my grandmother, the proceeds from the sale of my condominium in West Palm Beach, Florida, are to be divided equally between educational trust funds for my granddaughters, Victoria Marie Henderson and Michelle Ann Henderson, with each granddaughter receiving $10,000, $10. Ling ling ling. 0 to be used solely for post-secondary education expenses. There it was, in black and white. Legal. Notarized. Oficial. That money had been mine by law. My parents had no claim to it whatsoever. I immediately started searching for a family law attorney. The next morning, I had a consultation with David Chen, a well-respected family law attorney in Austin. His office was in a modern, high-rise downtown, and when I walked in, I felt both nervous and determined. David was in his mid-40s, sharp-eyed and professional. I laid out the entire situation for him: the housewarming party ambush, the eviction, and now the threatening letter from my parents' attorney. I showed him my grandmother's will and the letter from Davidson and Associates. David read through everything carefully, and then to my surprise, he actually chuckled. "Ms. Henderson," he said, looking up at me, "your parents' attorney should be embarrassed to have sent this letter." "What do you mean your parents have absolutely zero grounds for a lawsuit?" "Let me explain why." He held up one finger. "First, you received this money through a legal inheritance, as specified in your grandmother's will. It was never your parents' money to give, it was already yours. They were simply trustees executing the terms of the will." He held up a second finger. "Second, even if your parents had given you their own money for education, which they didn't, such a gift cannot be legally revoked. In Texas, as in most states, a completed gift belongs to the recipient. You can't give someone $20,000 and then demand it back years later because you're unhappy with their life choices." A third finger went up. "And third, they absolutely cannot force you to provide housing for your adult sister. You are under no legal obligation to allow anyone to live in your property. Property rights are constitutionally protected. What they're demanding is not only unreasonable, it's legally baseless." Relief flooded through me. "So I have nothing to worry about, nothing at all," David said firmly. "In fact, if they actually file this lawsuit, a judge will likely dismiss it, and they could be sanctioned for bringing a frivolous claim. Let me draft a response to their attorney, making our position crystal clear." 3 days later, David sent a detailed letter to Robert Davidson. Isq. It laid out the legal facts in language that left no room for misinterpretation. The funds in question were an inheritance, not a gift from the parents. Completed gifts cannot be revoked under Texas law. No legal obligation exists to provide housing to adult family members. Further harassment could result in a countersuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress. After that letter was sent, I never heard another word about the lawsuit. My parents' bluff had been called, and they'd folded immediately. I wish I could say that was the end of it. But my family had one more card to play, and it was the cruelest one yet. For about 6 weeks, there was blessed silence. No calls, no letters, no surprise visits. I threw myself into work, earned praise for a major project I completed, and even started dating someone I'd met at a coffee shop, a software developer named Thomas, who worked remotely for a company in Seattle. Life was good. Better than good. Actually, I was finally free from the constant drama and manipulation. Then Aunt Linda called one evening, and I could hear the tension in her voice immediately. "Vicky, there's something you need to know. It's not easy for me to tell you this." My heart sank. "What is it?" "Your parents are telling people a story about you, Ali, and it's spreading through the family." "What kind of lie?" Aunt Linda hesitated. "They're telling everyone that you promised Michelle and Derek they could live with you permanently. And then you kicked them out because you made romantic advances toward Derek, and he rejected you." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "They're saying what?" "They're claiming you had an inappropriate obsession with your brother-in-law, and when he turned you down, you evicted them out of spite and revenge." I felt like I was going to be sick. "Aunt Linda, you know that's completely insane." "Right, I barely know Derek. I would never. Of course I know it's not true," she said quickly. "Everyone who knows you knows it's not true. But they're convincing people who don't know you as well. At your cousin Jennifer's birthday party last weekend, they told this story to at least a dozen relatives. Some people were shocked. Others didn't know what to think." I sat down on my couch, my mind racing. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was defamation. This was my parents actively trying to destroy my reputation, my character, my life. Why would they do this? I whispered. Because they're embarrassed. Aunt Linda said, most of the family has figured out what really happened, that they enabled Michelle to try to take over your house. They're trying to rewrite the narrative so they don't look like the bad guys. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining the whispers, the looks, the judgment from relatives who'd believed the lie. What if it spread to my workplace? What if it affected my career? By morning, I knew what I had to do. I opened the family group chat on WhatsApp, a chat that included about 30 relatives, and I typed out a message, Mom and Dad. I am aware that you are spreading false and defamatory statements about me to family members. These statements claim that I made inappropriate romantic advances toward my brother-in-law Derek and evicted him and Michelle in retaliation for his rejection. These claims are completely false, slanderous, and legally actionable. I am giving you 48 hours to publicly retract these statements and admit to every family member you've told that you fabricated this story. If you do not comply, I will file a lawsuit for defamation under Texas civil law. My attorney, David Chen of Chen and Associates, is already aware of the situation and prepared to proceed. I have always treated my family with respect. I will not tolerate being slandered. I hit send and waited. The response was immediate. The chat exploded with messages. Cousin Jennifer, what is this true? Aunt Linda, I can confirm that this story has been circulating. I've heard it from multiple family members. My uncle Robert, Jim. Patricia. This is very serious. You need to address this immediately. For several hours, silence from my parents. Then, finally, my father sent a brief message. We need to handle this privately. Not in a group chat. I responded immediately. You chose to spread lies publicly. The retraction must be public as well. 48 hours. For 3 days. Nothing happened. I consulted with David, and we prepared to file the defamation lawsuit. Then Aunt Linda called me. They did it. She said, your mother invited about 20 relatives to their house last night for dinner. She stood up and admitted she made up the entire story about you and Derek. She admitted it, in front of everyone, yes? She said she'd been angry about the situation with Michelle, and she exaggerated and let her emotions get the best of her. She didn't use the word lie, but everyone understood what she was saying. How did people react? Most people were furious with her. Your cousin Jennifer actually got up and left. Uncle Robert told them both that they should be ashamed. Several people have stopped speaking to them entirely. I felt a wave of relief mixed with profound sadness. My mother had been forced to tell the truth, but only because I'd threatened her with legal action. Not because it was the right thing to do. Not because she felt guilty about trying to destroy my reputation. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. Vicky, Aunt Linda said gently. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. What they did was unforgivable. After we hung up, I sat on my deck and looked out at the greenbelt. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I'd won this battle, but the victory felt hollow. I'd never wanted to go to war with my family. I just wanted them to respect me, to treat me fairly, to see me as an equal. But instead, they'd forced my hand at every turn. Still, I'd learned something valuable. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own parents, destroy what I'd built. The next 6 months were the most peaceful of my adult life. Without the constant family drama, my work performance soared. I led a major product launch that exceeded all our targets. And my boss, Michael, pulled me aside one day with news that made my year. Victoria, the executive team has been watching your work. We'd like to promote you to senior product manager. Effective immediately. It comes with a 30% salary increase and a team of 3 people reporting to you. I accepted on the spot. Fighting back, tears of joy. With my first bonus from the promotion, I made improvements to my house. I hired a contractor to build a beautiful pergola in the backyard with an outdoor kitchen, a built-in grill, a small refrigerator, and a prep counter made of weather-resistant stone. I added landscape lighting that made the entire yard glow softly in the evenings. I planted a small herb garden near the patio. Every improvement felt like I was putting down deeper roots, claiming this space as truly mine. Around this time, Thomas and I were growing closer. We'd been dating for about 4 months, and I found myself looking forward to our evenings together more than anything else. He was kind, funny, and incredibly supportive. One night, as we sat on my deck, drinking wine and watching the stars, I told him the whole story: the housewarming party ambush, the eviction, the legal threats, the slander campaign, everything. Thomas listened without interrupting, his expression growing more shocked with each revelation. "Wait," he said when I finished. "Your sister and her husband just showed up with suitcases, without asking, and your parents thought that was okay. They thought I should be grateful to help family." I said bitterly. "That's not helping family, that's hijacking someone's life." He shook his head in disbelief. "And then they tried to sue you, and spread lies about you, Victoria. That's not just dysfunctional. That's abusive." Hearing him say it out loud, hearing someone from outside my family name it, for what it was felt like a revelation, I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting. He admitted. "Maybe I should have just let them stay." "Absolutely not," Thomas said firmly. "You set a healthy boundary. The fact that your family reacted so badly says everything about them and nothing about you." That conversation changed something in me. I stopped feeling guilty. I stopped wondering if I'd been too harsh. I'd done exactly what I needed to do to protect myself. And that was not only okay, it was necessary. A few months later, I turned 35. Thomas suggested we throw a party. And this time, I was selective about the guest list. I invited about 40 people, close friends from work, my Berkeley crew, neighbors who'd become friends, and the family members who'd actually supported me through everything: Aunt Linda, my cousin Jennifer, my uncle, Robert, and a few others who distanced themselves from my parents after the truth came out. Notably, absent my parents, Michelle, and Derek. The party was everything. My housewarming should have been relaxed, joyful, full of people who genuinely cared about me. We set up a long table in the backyard under the new pergola, and everyone brought dishes to share. Thomas grilled steaks and chicken. Someone brought a ridiculous ice cream cake with sparklers. As the sun set and the landscape lights came on, Jennifer stood up with her wine glass. "I want to make a toast," she announced. "To Victoria, Vicky, to those of us who've known her forever. This past year, you've taught us all something really important about family." Everyone keyed down, turning to listen. "Family isn't just about blood," Jennifer continued. "It's about the people who support your dreams, respect your boundaries, and celebrate your victories without jealousy or resentment. Vicky, you've built something beautiful here, not just this amazing home, but a life filled with people who truly value you. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to give in. You protected what you worked so hard to create, and you did it with grace, even when others didn't deserve it. We're all proud to be part of your chosen family." She raised her glass. To Vicky, everyone echoed. I felt tears streaming down my face, happy tears this time. Looking around at all these faces, I realized Jennifer was right. I had built a family, a real family of people who loved me for who I was, not for what they could get from me. Later that evening, as people were starting to leave, Jennifer pulled me aside. "Hey, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I thought you'd want to know Michelle and Derek are really struggling." Oh, I tried to keep my voice neutral. "They're renting a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a rough part of town. Derek's latest business venture failed, and they're both working retail jobs now. I heard they're shopping at the dollar store and haven't been to a restaurant in months." I waited for the satisfaction to hit, the sense of vindication, but instead, I just felt nothing. Maybe a little sad that they'd never learned to live within their means. That's their journey to figure out. I said finally. That's mature of you. Jennifer said. Oh. And here's the really interesting part. Mom and Dad stopped helping them financially too. Really? Yep. Apparently. After everything that happened, they finally told Michelle she needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. Aunt Linda said Mom used almost those exact words. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had finally learned to set boundaries with their golden child, but only after I'd forced them to by setting boundaries with all of them. Good for them. I guess. I said. Better late than never. About 2 weeks after my birthday party, I was grocery shopping at Whole Foods when I literally ran into Derek at the organic produce section. My cart bumped his, and we both looked up at the same time. Victoria, he said, his face flushing red. Hi. Hi. Derek, I replied, keeping my voice polite but distant. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. He looked different, thinner. Tired. He was wearing a Starbucks uniform under his jacket. Listen, he said suddenly. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to say something. I need to apologize. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Moving into your house, that whole thing, it wasn't my idea. I want you to know that. Michelle insisted. And your mother backed her up. And I went along with it because it was easier than fighting them both. You could have said no. I pointed out. I know. I should have. I knew it was wrong from the start. But I was too much of a coward to speak up. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely ashamed. Michelle was convinced you owed her something. She kept saying you'd had all the advantages. That you were the favorite. The favorite. I nearly laughed. Derek. My parents paid for her entire college experience and gave her everything she wanted her whole life. They gave me grandmother's inheritance and pretended it was their gift. I know that now, he said quietly. It took me a long time to see it. But Michelle has this way of rewriting history to make herself the victim, and I enabled it. We both did, me and your parents. Why are you telling me this? Because my conscience has been eating me alive. And because Michelle and I are getting divorced. I wasn't entirely surprised. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. It's been a long time coming. But during the divorce proceedings, a lot of stuff came out. Stuff about the plan for your house. A chill ran down my spine. What plan? Derek looked around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. Michelle never intended to stay temporarily. Her plan was to move in and establish legal residency. She thought if you let us stay long enough, it would be harder to kick us out. She was even looking into squatters' rights laws. My blood ran cold. Are you serious? Dead serious. Your mother knew the whole plan and approved it. They thought they could pressure you into letting us stay. And then after a few months, you'd be stuck with us. It was a deliberate scheme to take over your house. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Bad enough that they'd tried to move in unannounced, but this was premeditated. This was a conspiracy to steal my home. That's insane. I managed to say, I know, and I went along with it. That's why I'm apologizing. You deserved better from all of us. You worked hard for everything you have. And we tried to take it from you because we couldn't get our own lives together. We stood there in silence for a moment. Shoppers pushed cart past us, completely unaware of the heavy conversation happening in the produce aisle. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. I appreciate the honesty. Even if it's a little late. For what it's worth, Derek added. I'm working 2 jobs now, Starbucks during the day, DoorDash at night. Michelle actually has real clients for her social media business, instead of just talking about it. We're both learning what it means to actually work for what we have. I just wish we'd learned it sooner. Before we tried to destroy your life. I hope things work out for both of you, I said. And I meant it. As I watched him walk away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Derek had confirmed what I'd suspected all along, that my family's actions weren't just thoughtless or entitled. They were calculated. They'd actively plotted to take advantage of me, and I'd stopped them. About a month later, I received an envelope in the mail with my mother's handwriting on it. I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside were 3 pages of her cramped handwriting. I made myself a cup of tea, sat down on my couch, and began to read. The letter started with what appeared to be an apology. Dear Victoria, I've been doing a lot of thinking these past months, and I realize I owe you an apology. Your father and I were wrong about the situation with Michelle. We shouldn't have supported her plan to move into your home without your permission. We shouldn't have threatened you with a lawsuit. And I most certainly should never have spread those terrible lies about you and Derek. I'm ashamed of my behavior. You're my daughter. And I should have been proud of your success, instead of trying to diminish it. So far, so good. I felt a small flutter of hope. Maybe she really had changed. Maybe. Then I got to the second page. The truth is, your father and I are getting older. Dad's health isn't what it used to be. His blood pressure is unpredictable. And he's had some worrying chest pains. I worry about him constantly. And I worry about what will happen to us as we age. We've spent so much time thinking about the past. And we've lost sight of what's important, family. Blood relations. The people who are supposed to matter most. I'm reaching out because I want to repair our relationship before it's too late. Life is short. Victoria, we should forgive and forget. Move forward as a family. You only get one mother. One father. Don't you think it's time to let go of all this anger and hurt? I could see where this was going. But I kept reading. The third page was the kicker. I know you're doing very well in your career. Aunt Linda mentioned you got another promotion. We're so proud of you. Even if we haven't always shown it properly. The thing is, since so many family members have distanced themselves from us because of all this unpleasantness, we've been struggling a bit financially. Nothing serious. But things are tighter than they used to be. Your father's medication costs have gone up. And we had some unexpected home repairs. I'm not asking for much. Maybe you could help us out occasionally when you're able. Just a few $100s here and there when we're short. After all, we did give you $20,000 for college. Even if it technically came from your grandmother, we still made sure you got it. Think about it. Family should help family. Love. Mom, I read the letter twice. My emotions shifting from hope to anger to bitter disappointment. Even now, even after everything, my mother couldn't just apologize. She couldn't take responsibility without adding manipulation. The letter was calculated. Start with an apology to lower my defenses. Add some guilt about aging parents and mortality. Sprinkle in some gaslighting about forgive and forget. And finish with a request for money. She was still trying to use me. Still trying to manipulate me. Still convinced that if she just pushed the right emotional buttons, I'd open my wallet. Some people never change. I tore the letter into small pieces and dropped them in my recycling bin. That evening, Thomas came over for dinner. He found me on the deck, sitting in my favorite chair, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Everything okay? He asked, settling into the chair next to mine. You seem deep in thought. My mother sent me a letter. Half apology. Half guilt trip. Half request for money. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That's 3 halves. Despite everything. I laughed. Yeah. She's overachieving in the manipulation department. Are you going to respond? No. I said firmly. Never. That door is closed. Do you regret it? Cutting them off completely. I thought about it carefully before answering. Sometimes I feel sad about it. I wish I had the kind of parents who could be genuinely happy for me. I wish I had a sister who was my friend instead of my competitor. But regret, no. My life is so much better without their constant drama and attempts to exploit me. That's healthy, Thomas said, reaching over to take my hand. You're happier. More successful. More at peace. That's what matters. I am happy. I realized. Genuinely. Deeply happy. I have work I love. A home I adore. friends who support me. And I smiled at him. Someone pretty special in my life. Someone incredibly handsome and charming, Thomas asked with mock seriousness. And humble, I added. Don't forget humble. We sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and I felt profoundly grateful for everything I had and everything I'd left behind. 6 months later, on a perfect Saturday evening in early fall, Thomas and I were having dinner on the deck. The weather was gorgeous, that sweet spot where Texas stops being brutally hot and becomes actually pleasant. I'd made pasta. Thomas had brought wine. And we were enjoying the peaceful sounds of the greenbelt, coming alive with evening birdsong. I want to show you something, Thomas said suddenly, standing up. Now we're in the middle of dinner. It'll just take a minute. Come here. Curious. I followed him to the pergola. He'd set up the outdoor lights earlier, and they cast a warm glow over the space. Remember when you first showed me this house? Thomas asked. You told me about every dream you had for it. The pergola, the lighting, the herb garden, and you made it all happen. With a little help from you, I pointed out. He'd spent countless weekends helping me with various projects. Victoria, he said, and something in his voice made my heart start beating faster. You're the strongest, most resilient person I've ever met. You've taught me what it means to set boundaries, to value yourself, to build the life you deserve. You've shown me that family isn't about obligation, it's about genuine love and respect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Oh my God, I whispered. Thomas got down on one knee. I want to be part of your chosen family. I want to build a life with you in this house you created. This sanctuary you fought so hard to protect. Victoria, will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, a simple, elegant diamond on a platinum band. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. Yes. Absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto my finger and stood up, and I threw my arms around him. We stood there in the pergola, under the lights I'd installed with my promotion bonus. On the deck of the house I'd saved for 10 years to buy, and I felt like the luckiest person in the world. This moment, this place, this person, I'd earned all of it. Not through family connections or handouts, but through my own hard work, determination, and willingness to protect what was mine. It's been 2 years since that catastrophic housewarming party, and my life has transformed in ways I never imagined. Thomas and I got married last spring in a small, intimate ceremony in our backyard. About 40 guests attended, close friends, supportive colleagues, and the family members who'd stood by me. Aunt Linda walked me down the aisle. Jennifer was my maid of honor. It was perfect, no drama, no toxic relatives, just people who genuinely loved and supported us. We honeymooned in Italy for 2 weeks. And when we came home, it was to a house that truly belonged to both of us. Thomas had officially moved in, and we'd made the space ours together, combining our book collections, rearranging furniture, adding little touches that reflected both our personalities. My career has continued to thrive. Last year, I was promoted to Director of Product Development, overseeing a team of 12 people. The skills I'd learned during those family battles, setting clear boundaries, communicating directly, not allowing anyone to manipulate or take advantage of me, made me a better leader. My team respects me because I'm fair, transparent, and I protect them from corporate nonsense. Thomas and I are even talking about starting a family soon. The irony isn't lost on me. The house that my sister said I didn't need because I was alone will soon be filled with the family I always dreamed of. About once a month, Aunt Linda updates me on my parents and Michelle. I don't ask for the information, but she seems to think I should know. Your mother calls me sometimes. She told me during our last conversation. She asks about you. Wants to know if you're happy, if you're doing well, and what do you tell her the truth? That you're thriving, that you got married, that you're successful. that you're surrounded by people who love you, and that you've done it all without their help or their drama. How does she react? She usually gets quiet, then changes the subject. I don't feel satisfaction from this. I don't feel vindication. I just feel nothing. That chapter of my life is closed. Michelle and Derek's divorce was finalized about a year ago. From what I hear, they're both working steady jobs now and living within their means. Derek still works at Starbucks and apparently got promoted to shift supervisor. Michelle actually built up a legitimate social media consulting business with real clients. They're learning what I learned at 16, that you have to earn what you want in life. My parents have stopped asking family members to reach out to me. They've stopped making excuses for their behavior. Mostly, they just seem sad and isolated, having alienated so many relatives with their lies and manipulation. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder what would have happened if I'd been weaker. If I'd let Michelle and Derek stay just for a few weeks. If I'd believed my mother's guilt trips about family loyalty. If I'd paid that $20,000 just to keep the peace. I know exactly what would have happened. They would have taken everything. My house. My peace. My self-respect. My success. They would have drained me dry and blamed me for not giving more. Instead, I chose myself. I chose my boundaries. I chose my future. And that has made all the difference. Last week, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference in Houston. The organizers wanted me to talk about my career path. But I decided to tell a different story, the story of my house. Standing at that podium, looking out at 200 faces, I told them about buying my dream home, about the housewarming party that turned into a nightmare, about setting boundaries with people who were supposed to love me, about the legal threats and the slander and the final manipulation attempts. The hardest word I ever learned to say was, no. I told the audience, especially to family. We're taught that family comes first. That blood is thicker than water. That we should sacrifice anything for the people who raised us. But here's what I learned. Real family, whether biological or chosen, respects you. Real family celebrates your success, instead of trying to take it for you. Real family doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. I saw women in the audience nodding, some wiping their eyes. Protecting your boundaries isn't selfish. I continued. It's essential. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the people trying to use you is to say no. To hold firm. To protect what you've built. After the talk, at least a dozen women came up to share their own stories of family manipulation, that of toxic relatives who demanded everything and gave nothing. Each one thanked me for giving them permission to choose themselves. That evening, driving home to Austin, I called Thomas. How did it go? He asked. Really well. I think people needed to hear that they're allowed to set boundaries. Even with family. You've come a long way from that scared woman who didn't know how to kick her sister out of her own house. I laughed. I wasn't scared, I was shocked. There's a difference. Fair point. Hey. I made dinner. Your favorite chicken parmesan. You're perfect. I'll be home in 2 hours. Drive safe. I love you. Love you too. As I drove through the Texas Hill Country, watching the sun set over the rolling landscape, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal. The pain. The battles I'd fought. And I realized something profound. Every no I'd said to my family was actually a yes to myself. Yes to my worth. Yes to my dreams. Yes to the life I deserved. My house on Cedar Park Drive isn't just a collection of rooms and walls. It's a testament to what one person can achieve when they refuse to be a victim. When they set clear boundaries. When they believe in their own worth. It's proof that you can create the life you deserve. Even if your own family tries to tear it down. And it's a reminder that the most important family is the one you choose, the people who support your dreams. Respect your boundaries. And celebrate your victories without jealousy or resentment. I pull into my driveway. And the house is lit up. Warm and welcoming. Through the window, I can see Thomas in the kitchen, My home, my sanctuary, my reward for years of hard work and for having the courage to protect what I'd earned. I walk through that front door, and I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And nobody can ever take that away from me. Story 2. My talented sister received my college money from my parents. I gave them her contact when they needed assistance with medical costs 10 years later. She lived in their former basement and never completed her college education. All of this began a few weeks ago while I was browsing Facebook. A friend of mine from high school shared a post regarding their child's college graduation debt. They were raving about how they had established a college fund when their child was a toddler and had never wavered from it. You know, it was one of those modest, boastful blogs. However, it struck a nerve I believed I had buried years ago. And it stopped me cold. As you can see, I was also expected to have a college fund. When I was growing up, my parents made a huge deal out of it. As a child, I believed my dad when he said, "We're putting this toward your future. Amber, one day you'll thank us." He would grin at me on my birthday and Christmas. When we didn't take trips, as my friends' families did, I didn't even beg for pricey presents or wine. They would say it's for college. And I wholeheartedly agreed. Here's the problem. However, that money was gone by the time I really started college. I can still clearly recall the day I learned, sitting at the kitchen table with a pile of college brochures. I was 17 years old. I casually inquired if we could get together soon to determine which schools we could afford with my fund when my dad, Andrew, stepped in with a cup of tea, just long enough for me to notice. He froze for half a second. The following day, when my parents sat me down in the living room, he gave me this tight grin and said, "We'll talk about it later. We need to talk about your college plans." Amber, my mother, Isabella, began, clearing her throat. I became tense right away because of the serious tone. At that point, they informed me that the college fund had been depleted. I first assumed they were saying that something terrible had occurred, such as that they had been defrauded or had incurred some unforeseen medical expenses. However, they had used it to purchase Gabriella, my younger sister, the one who received all the attention as a youngster due to her intelligence and potential was Gabriella, the brilliant child, the golden child. Gabriella was winning math contests while I was having trouble earning BEs in algebra. Gabriella was attending robotics camps and private tutoring sessions, which were entirely supported by our parents. While I was working nonstop after school to save money for college, those teachers and camps must have been expensive. In their great wisdom, my parents concluded that Gabriella's education was a more worthwhile investment. Even my dad used the words "a better investment," as if I were some old stock that had been written off. In addition to being angry, I was also wounded. I had faith in them. They gave me the impression that they had my back and that I wouldn't need to put in as much effort to succeed. Gabriella needed the money more. So they were now advising me to apply for scholarships and take out loans. Even worse, Gabriella didn't seem to feel guilty about it. I can still feel my stomach sink as she remarked, "It's not my fault you're not as good at school." She was 16 at the time. And when I questioned her, she just shrugged. It was entitlement, not simply haughtiness. She really thought she was more deserving of it than I was. I ultimately used a mix of loans, scholarships, and part-time work to pay for my college education. I spent summers working with my aunt on construction projects, worked at the college library, and waited tables on the weekends. Despite the difficulty, I managed to make it work. Gabriella, meantime, excelled in high school and enrolled in a prestigious private university, which was entirely financed by the money that should have gone for my education. I suppressed my rage and concentrated on my own life for years. I was too tired to remain angry. But sometimes, my parents would give me updates on Gabriella, telling me that she was having trouble figuring out her route, that she needed more money for this or that program, or that she was changing her major once again. Additionally, it hurt each time. After that, I made an effort to avoid contact with my family. We were no longer as close as we had been as children. Even though I still sent cards on holidays and phoned on birthdays, I gave my profession my all, since I was determined to make a name for myself on my own. Here's the worst part. However, they drew me back in just when I thought I had moved on. My dad contacted me out of the blue last month. He sounded apprehensive, maybe even a touch embarrassed. Things really began to go apart when he indicated that he and my mother wanted to speak to me about something significant. Something pertaining to family. Update, my phone rang on a Thursday night, signaling that my dad was calling. That wasn't out of the ordinary. Over the years, we maintained a low degree of communication. A Christmas card here, and a birthday phone call there. However, I paused when I saw his name on my computer. There was something strange about it. His voice sounded unsteady when I spoke, as if he was trying too hard to seem happy, but was having trouble. He said, "Hi, Amber," stopping just long enough to give me the creeps. He was not one for small conversation. "It's been a while. How are you?" It seemed odd for my dad to suddenly become interested in my life since he was the kind of guy who got right to the point. He broke up the act after a few courteous but uncomfortable interactions. His words, "We need to talk. It's important." Important. The word lingered in the air, like an unpleasant stench. I braced myself by leaning on the kitchen counter. "Okay," I said. He paused again. Longer this time. Until he eventually said, "What's going on? Your mother and I were hoping you might assist us out with some financial difficulties." I can't claim to have been shocked. My parents' poor financial management had long been a suspicion of mine. As they grew up, they would use every effort to provide Gabriella with every benefit. However, I never gave the source of the funds any concern, but it was quite another thing to hear him say it out. Then I gently said, "Help." How he began. "Well?" His voice trailing off. I wasn't sure how to react for a second when she said, "Your mom's medical bills have been piling up, and we've fallen behind on the mortgage. We just need a little help to get back on track." Years ago, that my parents had made it quite clear what their top priorities were. And now they were looking to me for a rescue, after 10 years of quiet on anything that wasn't trivial. With a harder tone than I meant, I said, "Have you talked to Gabriella?" There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "We have. But she's not in a position to help right now." "What do you mean?" There was another prolonged silence. "She's been living with us," he grudgingly acknowledged. "Their golden child, Gabriella, who received everything on a silver platter, was back under their roof, living in the same basement where we used to play video games as kids. For a while now, things didn't exactly go as planned for her after college. I didn't press him for details at the time, but the picture was beginning to come together. I tried not to be angry, but I couldn't help but say it. "You gave her my college fund, paid for her expensive education, and now she's living with you, Runtry. And you're asking me for money." He responded right away, saying, "Amber, that's not the real issue. This has to do with family." It seemed as though he didn't even hear me when I said, "We're in trouble, and we need your help." I said, "I'll think about it," just to get him off the phone. As if the years of struggle I'd gone through to make something of myself didn't matter. As if Gabriella's failures were just bad luck, while my success was somehow guaranteed all along. I couldn't sleep that night because my mind kept going over the conversation again, bringing back memories I hadn't considered in years. The arguments, the partiality, the incessant justifications for Gabriella's actions. And now they wanted me to step in and save the day. I called Gabriella the following morning, even though I didn't want to, because I needed to hear her side of the story. Her response was defensive right away, as if she were anticipating a fight. "What do you want?" "Amber, they're in trouble, and you can't help them," she continued. "Dad said you're living with them." I said, "What's happening?" She sighed heavily, like this conversation was a huge inconvenience. "Yeah, I'm here. After college, things didn't work out. All right. I'm working it out. Working it out. I said again. Gabriella. It's been years. What have you been up to? Why are you concerned? You've always looked down on me anyway. She shouted back. I suppressed the temptation to scream. Because this isn't about me. It's about my parents. She said. Oh. So now you're the perfect daughter. Miss Self-Made. Give me a break. You wouldn't be where you are if they hadn't paid for your food and a roof over your head when we were kids. Her response was so direct that I had to take a deep breath before answering. They're drowning in bills, and they're asking me for help because you can't step up. After a long silence, she finally said, I don't need a lecture from you. Maybe not. I replied. But you need to figure your life out because I'm not cleaning up your messes. They sacrificed for you. Gabriella. They gave you everything I didn't get. And you still managed to screw it up. I hung up before she could respond. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to help my parents even after everything they'd done. But another part of me, the bigger part, I knew this wasn't my responsibility. In the end, I called my dad back. I'm sorry. I told him, I can't help you. You should speak with Gabriella if you need assistance. You made an investment in her. He sounded surprised, maybe even offended. Please. Amber. I have to take care of my own life. I responded firmly. I put a lot of effort into getting to this point. And I won't jeopardize my life because Gabriella didn't meet your standards. I hung up after giving him Gabriella's number in case he didn't already have it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was defending myself. Even if it felt harsh and frigid. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but worry what would come next. The last update. My mom texted me a week after I informed my dad I wouldn't assist them. We merely need to chat. It wasn't lengthy. No explanation. No punctuation. I debated whether or not to reply to the message for a long time before choosing to ignore it. They could wait to say anything they needed to. A few days later, I received an email from an unfamiliar sender. The topic line about your family was unclear. Assuming it was spam, I almost erased it. But my curiosity overcame me. There was a brief, direct message within. Hello, Amber. Although I'm Gabriella's landlord, you don't know me. As an emergency contact, she left your email address. I can't reach her. And she hasn't paid the rent in 3 months. I believed you need to be aware. I couldn't believe it. Mark. It seems that Gabriella left my parents' home without notifying either of us. And she was now bringing me up in her mess. My first impulse was to phone my father and demand explanations. But I restrained myself beforehand. No. I wasn't the issue. I'd been clear about it. However, I was compelled to get engaged once something occurred. I discovered a certified letter in my mailbox a week later. It came from a company that collects debt. It seemed like Gabriella had co-signed something using my name and credit. The letter said that I owed $112. Ling ling ling. But I had no clue what that meant. I became enraged. I opened the letter with trembling hands and a racing mind. What was she capable of doing? How could my sister have fallen to such a low level, before acting? I spent a day to collect evidence and calm down. I informed the collections agency that I had never co-signed anything for Gabriella when I phoned them to discuss the problem. I followed their advice and reported fraud to the police the next morning. I wasn't finished. However, I made the decision that Gabriella needed to take responsibility for her conduct. I engaged a private investigator to look into Gabriella's financial history, a little expense that I felt was well worth it. Even I was astonished by what they found. Gabriella had created a credit card under my name, in addition to co-signing debts in my name. Up until lately, she had been paying minimal payments to avoid the card going to collectors after it had been maxed out months before. Equipped with this knowledge, I started the process of contesting the bogus accounts and submitted a second police complaint. The investigator was informed that I needed a record of everything. I would make sure Gabriella couldn't escape the mess she had made if she was going to cause a rift. My parents continued to contact and email me in the meanwhile, pleading with me to step up and assist Gabriella in getting back on her feet. I read that connection and laughed out when my dad even said, "Family forgives." Amber, you don't want to ruin your relationship over something like this. What connection? When they prioritized Gabriella's potential above my future, they destroyed that bridge years ago. However, a few weeks later, the last straw was delivered. Gabriella contacted me out of the blue. So she must have understood I was filing a lawsuit. Her tone had changed from the haughty one, I recalled, to one of desperation. "You made a mistake. All right. I just need a little help to fix this. Please. Girl. Don't just throw me to the wolves." She appealed to Amber. Her excuses piled up like trash on a sidewalk while I listened to her for a time. She let out a sigh of relief as I eventually paused her breathing and said, "You're right. Gabriella, I can't throw you to the wolves. You sacrificed yourself to the wolves a long time ago." So I intervened, saying, "Thank you. You can now handle the consequences." Before she could answer, I hung up. I didn't talk to Gabriella after that. She ultimately had to handle the fraud allegations by herself. She attempted to contact my parents for assistance, but they were emotionally and financially exhausted. When I last heard from her, she was couch surfing at a friend's house after filing for bankruptcy. After that, my parents stopped coming to me for assistance. I believe they came to the realization that I was no longer their safety net. Am I guilty? I feel free. Generally. But a bit, if I'm being honest, free from their obvious partiality, their guilt trips, and their demands. They didn't contribute to the life I've created for myself. And I feel like I'm in charge for the first time in years. I sometimes imagine an existence in which my parents had not staked everything on Gabriella. Would it have been simpler? Most likely. However, I also wouldn't be who I am now. Someone who is aware of her value and will not allow herself to be exploited again. Therefore, although it's possible that this narrative ended without a happy family reunion or a flawless reconciliation, I honestly believe it's all right. Sometimes letting go is more effective than exacting retribution. I got a surprise present in the mail, 6 months after everything happened. A little, shabby cardboard box with my parents' return address was inside. I discovered a pile of old pictures, report cards, and sketches from my early years inside. My mother's letter was also there. It started, "Dear Amber, in an effort to filter through decades' worth of recollections, I've been cleaning. I realized how badly we let you down when I came upon them. With everything, not just the college money. Your potential was there in front of us. But we were too preoccupied with Gabriella's to see it." I laid out the contents of the box while sitting on the floor of my living room. Despite my terrible bangs and braces, I was smiling triumphantly in a picture taken at my 8th grade graduation. Another had me grinning despite being coated in mud from gardening while working at my first summer job. Images of accomplishments that had not been honored since Gabriella had always been the center of attention. The letter went on. "I understand that an apology is insufficient to address the situation. Gabriella's actions regarding the credit fraud were unacceptable. And our response attempting to defend her once again, rather than defending you, was even worse." My tears were from a kind of bittersweet realization rather than despair or anger. "Your father and I have been in counseling, trying to understand where we went wrong. We're not asking for forgiveness or money. We just wanted you to have these memories and to know that we see you now." These were not tears of forgiveness, although acknowledged. That bridge was still firmly destroyed. They realized what they had done at last. My mom's sister, my Aunt Linda, called me a week later. She wanted to get coffee and had heard about everything. She told me about some family history I was unaware of over lattes. It seems that my mom was the Gabriella of her time, the talented kid who received all the attention, while Linda managed to get by with little help. She said, "History has a way of repeating itself." While stirring her coffee, "Your mom became exactly what she vowed she would never be. But you, Amber, you broke the cycle. She was right. I had built something different in spite of everything. Or perhaps because of it. I had just purchased my first home. A modest but lovely craftsman with a garden. I was gradually transforming. Most importantly, I had found peace. My parents still send me occasional emails with brief updates about their lives. Careful not to ask for anything. Gabriella, who I last heard was working at a call center in another state, asked me through a cousin if I would consider dropping the fraud charges. I didn't reply. Maybe we'll find a way to get back together someday. But it won't be based on duty or guilt. Rather, it will be based on respect. Which it took them losing me to realize. I read them. But I don't often reply. Yesterday, while going through some papers, I came across that old Facebook post that set everything off. I couldn't help but smile when I read about the college fund. I have a healthy balance in my savings account now. Set aside for future education, not for any children yet. As I'm not there yet. But for the possibility. I also know that if I ever have children, they will know they are loved, supported, and valued equally. Blood is thicker than water. Or you only get one family. People sometimes ask me if I regret being so strict with my family. But I've come to realize that family is about choices, not blood. My parents chose Gabriella, who chose to take advantage of me. And I chose myself. Your worth isn't determined by their investment in you. And your potential isn't limited by their vision. Sometimes the family you build for yourself through friendships, hard work, and self-respect is stronger than the one you were born into. I wish I could tell that adolescent girl sitting at the kitchen table with her college brochures, her heart about to be broken. I am writing this story 10 years after that college fund betrayal. Not as a victim, but as a victor. Not because I wanted retribution, but because I was free to create my own life, make my own decisions, and write my own story. Perhaps, just perhaps, someone else needs to hear that it's acceptable to stop burning yourself alive, to keep others warm. Since sometimes letting go isn't the conclusion of the narrative but rather the start of a better one. It's okay to pick yourself and to let go.